Okay, so the first one I want to talk to you about is somebody who's going to be very challenging to work with, to manage, to be around, is somebody who has a hard time, in fact, has not defined boundaries in their life. They're the kind of person that is going to have a really hard time taking ownership and responsibility for what they need to take responsibility of. They'll also jump right into your world and play with it and mess with it, not understanding that you have responsibility in that world. All right, and so they lack boundaries about themselves. They're out of touch with your boundaries. They're out of touch with organizational boundaries, and they're just all over the place. And so how do I deal with somebody who just doesn't understand boundaries? In effective organizations, there's clarified roles and responsibilities. It's something that's really important, and high-performing organizations spend quite a bit of time on defining responsibilities. That's because it empowers people to be really effective. If I know what I'm responsible for, and I know what you're responsible for, that helps us work together. Somebody who refuses to take responsibility and somebody who crosses over into your boundaries, pretending like they don't see them, or maybe they really just don't see them, those people are going to be very, very difficult to work with. They're very challenging. And so how do I deal with somebody that's boundaryless? Well, this is where the issue of definition and clarity becomes so important. I need to be proactive in a conversation about, wait a minute, here's what I'm responsible for. Here's what you're responsibility for. And I don't do that to them, I do it with them. That's a conversation. It's a difficult conversation. We need to come to agreement that you understand my boundaries. We need to come to agreement in terms of what are your boundaries. Now, we don't stop there with just the definition. Then we talk about how can we both hold one another accountable, encourage one another, challenge one another about how can you be more effective with your definition of boundary, and I can be more effective with my definition of what I'm responsible for. And so the issue of accountability becomes important, because if I'm going to learn how to work with somebody that's out of touch with boundaries, I'm going to have to help them see boundaries, relate to them. And so definition becomes so important. And then we need to have the conversation about, one, I'm going to challenge you and you're empowered to challenge me, but we need to come to clarity about what happens when somebody breaks through boundaries in an unhealthy way. There needs to be specific consequences, and we need to talk about those consequences before they happen. And so the conversation in which we're dealing with becoming very concrete. Here's what I'm responsible for. Here's what you're responsible for. Very concrete. And now we're going to talk about, we're going to hold each other accountable to those. Let's weigh in on a regular basis. How is this going? You and I are struggling here. Can we agree to that? We're now agreeing to the definition. Now we're going to challenge one another and encourage one another with it. And then there's going to be consequences, and we're going to get both parties to agree to all those steps. Now that may sound like that's just going to completely wear you out, and it might wear you out a little bit. You're going to have to keep your resiliency high if you're dealing with somebody that doesn't have boundaries. And so by it's going to take some energy. And if you just avoid the person and don't lean into that relationship, well, the ability to work together is going to be really, really ineffective. And so you're going to have to lean into it. All right. And so just concrete definition, accountability, consequences. We got to build that into how we relate. And you're going to find that you're going to be in much better shape to be able to deal with somebody who doesn't have healthy boundaries.